Presentation outlines a 12-foot-long timeline covering the last 6,000 years of history, highlighting key figures referred to as divine educators. These educators, depicted as mirrors, include known prophets like Zoroaster and Jesus Christ, as well as others about whom less is understood. The source poses that these prophets are the primary teachers of humanity, bestowing universal education and spiritual development. Drawing on philosophical statements and quotes attributed to Abdu'l-Baha, the text emphasized the transformative power of education and contrasts the fundamental principles laid down by these divine figures with later imitations. Suggests that these heavenly educators are foundational to the advancement of nations. When one first looks at this timeline, it is 12 feet long. It starts at 4000 BC and therefore covers the last 6,000 years of history. This 3D timeline is based upon a timeline first seen presented by Ruth Moffat. She created the original one, which has been cleaned up and reproduced as a printable JPEG image. The mirrors that are regularly spread along it are the divine educators we know about. On Ruth Moffat's paper timeline, these divine educators were shown as candles of different sizes. As we look closer, we notice there are others referred to as teachers of God or manifestations. These include figures like Confucius and white-calf buffalo woman. This is why there is a mirror near the beginning with nothing in front of it. There are many divine educators throughout the world that we know little about. A question that arises is whether they claim to be the voice of the Creator. According to the statement of philosophers, the differences in degrees of humankind from the lowest to the highest is due to education. The prophets of God are considered the first educators. They bestow universal education upon man and cause him to rise from the lowest levels of savagery to the highest pinnacles of spiritual development. Why is our world so richly diverse? Because cultures are shaped by more than just geography or language. They're woven from creativity, values, and community. Here's what contributes: creative, cultural jobs and industries, community organizations and shared spaces, intangible traditions like ceremonies, culture and natural heritage, local festivals and events, deep-rooted values including indulgence versus restraint, short versus long-term views, identity dynamics, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, how we handle uncertainty and power distancing. Abdu'l-Baha, who is the son of Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, stated that education makes the ignorant wise, the tyrant just, and promotes happiness, strengthens the mind, develops the will, and makes fruitless trees of humanity fruitful. What happens when the greatest minds of philosophy gather in one room, painted on a wall? Raphael's School of Athens is one of the most iconic masterpieces, capturing this idea in breathtaking form. You can find it in the Vatican St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, where it continues to inspire awe and admiration. Zoroaster, considered one of the divine philosophers, he is depicted in Raphael's painting The School of Athens in the Vatican. The dates of 1500 to 1000 BC are commonly accepted for when he lived, taught, and founded Zoroastrianism. What if one could lift a whole civilization from chaos to clarity. Zoroaster, also known as Zoroastra, was such a voice. As one of the earliest known prophets, he ignited a spiritual revolution in ancient Persia that shaped the course of history. In the words of the Baha'i writings, the prophets of God are the first educators. They bestow universal education upon man, cause him to rise from the lowest levels of savagery to the highest pinnacles of spiritual development. Zoroaster did just that, teaching about truth, purity, and the eternal struggle between good and evil, laying the foundation for moral thought in many later religions. Zoroaster, a flame in the ancient darkness, long before Moses climbed Mount Sinai or the Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree, a solitary figure in ancient Persia, lit a flame that still burns in hearts today. Around 1500 BC, Zoroaster, one of the earliest known divine educators, rose to proclaim the triumph of truth over falsehood, light over darkness. What might his ancient voice still whisper to our modern souls? Zoroaster was not just a historical figure, but a timeless spiritual teacher. The king who allowed the Jews to return from exile in Babylon was likely a Zoroastrian, as were the Magi who came to pay homage to Jesus. Nevertheless, although capacities are not the same, every member of the human race is capable of education. His Holiness Jesus Christ was an educator of humanity. His teachings were altruistic, and he is considered one of mankind's universal divine educators. He, along with all the manifestations of God, taught mankind by the power of the Holy Spirit, and not through human agency, as human power is limited, while the divine power is illimitable and infinite. What if love could speak and walk among us? Jesus Christ, one of humanity's universal divine educators, brought a message of boundless compassion, forgiveness, and inner transformation. His life and teachings uplifting the hearts of millions, guiding humanity from darkness towards the light of spiritual truth and unity. Imagine living in a world where time itself begins with the birth of a child. So powerful was Christ's influence, that even centuries later, our calendars still echo his name. Yet the mystery remains. When exactly was he born? And what does it mean that all of history, before and after, is measured by the life of one divine educator? There is a historical and spiritual significance of Christ in an interfaith context, and gently prepares us to explore the broader theme of divine educators. What gives divine teachings their timeless power? Jesus and all the manifestations of God taught not through human means, but through the limitless power of the Holy Spirit, a force beyond the bonds of earthly ability. His Holiness Baha'u'llah has revoiced and reestablished the quintessence of the teachings of all the prophets, setting aside accessories and purifying religion. What if all the world's religions spoke with one voice? Baha'u'llah has rekindled the core truth of all the prophets, sweeping away man-made distortions and restoring the purity of divine guidance. Among the books he has written is one entitled Hidden Words. The preface of this book announces that it contains the essence of the words of the prophets of the past, clothed in brevity for the teachings and spiritual guidance of the peoples of the world. Reading it can help one understand the true foundation of religion and reflect upon the inspiration of the messengers of God. It is described as light upon light. How has humanity grown in wisdom through the ages? the divine educators, God's manifestations, like Abraham, Moses, Zoroaster, Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, the Bab, and Baha'u'llah, are the first true teachers of the human race. Each one appears in a different age, revealing divine truths suited to humanity's level of development. This ongoing process, called progressive revelation, is how God guides us stage by stage towards spiritual maturity. The purpose of this presentation is to show that the holy manifestations of God, the divine prophets, are the first teachers of the human race. They are divine educators of mankind. They are universal educators, and the fundamental principles they have laid down are the cause and factors of the advancement of nations. Forms and imitation, which creep in afterwards, are not conducive to progress. On the contrary, these are the destroyers of the human foundation established by the heavenly educators. The imitations and superstitions that have crept in are at wide variance with the original precepts and commandments. If the story of humanity is a great unfolding book, then the divine educators are its guiding chapters, each teacher revealing new wisdom and suited for the time. Today, we glimpse the pages written by Zoroaster, Jesus Christ, and Baha'u'llah, but the story doesn't end here. In fact, it may only be beginning. Upcoming presentations will explore the vast canvas of creation, from the explosive brilliance of the Big Bang to the delicate harmony of our solar system, and how both science and religion, once seen as rivals, may be threads of a single divine tapestry. Which chapter will speak to your soul? Thank you for joining us on this journey through the lives and teachings of some of humanity's greatest divine educators. From ancient Persia to Bethlehem to the Garden of Baji, their voices can still call the noblest parts of us, reminding us that truth is not bound by time or tradition. As we part for now, consider this. Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i faith, wrote in January 1935 that Baha'u'llah says of the next divine educator, teacher. As to the meaning of the quotation, my fears are for him who will be sent down onto you after me. This refers to the manifestation who is to come after 1,000 or more years, who, like all previous messengers of God, will be subjected to persecution, but will eventually triumph over them. For men are ill will have been and will always continue to be in this world, unless mankind reaches a state of complete and absolute perfection, a condition which is not only improbable, but actually impossible to attain.